Well, we're here again. Hi, BJ.
Hey, Steve.
What's your
Good to
week
see
been
you.
like?
It was a good week. Had a couple practices and went to art of coaching yesterday in Milwaukee
Right,
at
right. I saw that.
yeah. So we had a couple of big names in the gym. Terry Liskevich and Russ Rose were there. Debbie Brown is there. Uh, they were. It's interesting to hear their perspective on the game and what it was that they were using during their run. So it was a good good day.
Leskevich was the first. We used to have in the Great Lakes region. We used to have a December coaching thing, 1 or 2 days, I guess, over the weekend. And Leskevich came early on in my like I was just a brand new coach, and it was a freebie, and it really well done. And I remember him saying, "Hey, you know how you build a great team?" And he said, "Great players. We coaches don't matter very much. You need to recruit." And he said, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh yeah." And turns out there's a lot of truth to that. So, little something I learned from him anyway. But speaking of coaches, let's get our guest in here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who we're having with us?
Yeah, this is a cool one for me. Ray Lewis is he has a I'm not certain that anybody has done what he's about to attempt. He's going to start his second men's Division One program um, at Merrimack, and it's amazing to me that he's done this twice, which we'll get into a little bit. And in doing my research, maybe I forgot this or blanked it out, or maybe Ray will remind me. I don't know. We'll see. But Ray started, I believe, his collegiate playing career uh, basically in my backyard at Lakeland College, and I can't recall. He can straighten me out. I can't recall if we met or remember each other. So let's get him on here and ask.
There he
Hey,
How's it
is.
Ray.
going? Yeah, I did. So that's actually right. I played my freshman year at Lakeland College, and Chad Schreiber was the head coach. That was just a few years before they transitioned to Division Three, so they were still collegiate club. But Lakeland's about 1,000 students, or it was at that point, and we got the chance to compete for the collegiate club national championship in the highest division. So it was a really cool
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, Schreiber, obviously a great friend of mine. We've done a lot of stuff together, played together at adult nationals, and fished together once in a while, and have lunch once in a while. So I mean, a great guy, and another one of these guys that nobody knows that had a huge impact. Um, let's let's talk a little bit more about you moved from Las Vegas. I mean, everything, the glitz and glamour of the capital of the world, to Lakeland College, which nobody knows about because it's in the middle of a cornfield. How in the heck did he convince you to come to Lakeland?
Chad is an amazing recruiter. I'll give him that. So, like I said, it was collegiate club, but unlike most club programs where you just get students that, might be just a general student that happened to play volleyball in high school or club, Chad was recruiting. So, I'm not sure if I reached out to him or he had reached out to me initially, but he was just consistent and would reach out about once a week. And then as I got late in the process, I had some NAI options as well as a Division II program that I was looking at. And, just Chad was the most consistent one and just seemed the most genuinely interested in me. And sure enough, I packed up and moved across the country to a cornfield. It was a very unique experience. I'm glad I did it. I definitely met some great friends and had a unique experience that I would never have had without going to Lakeland.
Yeah, that's cool. It's I, in this area we sometimes forget about. I mean, we don't forget, but it's there. It's now Lakeland University. It's no longer Lakeland College. They have a couple of colleges on the campus, But the thing that you mentioned about Schreiber is really important. And if there are recruiters that listen to this, probably not, but he would call everyone. I mean, he literally he had no fear of calling from Lakeland College, where uh, you're not going to get the top 50 kids in the country. He would call all the kids from Wisconsin that were going to Minnesota or Wisconsin or Nebraska or Penn State and just say, hey, here we are. Maybe you ought to check us out.
Well, I will say this. I attribute part of my success to him as a recruiter because it's like you can build a successful program anywhere, right? If you're committed to your cause, if you really believe in what you're building, kids will come play. Like if you build it, they will come. And, back in Arizona, I was at a school without a gym. And so, and that was daunting at first. I was like, I went to a cornfield in Wisconsin. Like, this should be easy to sell.
That's awesome. Yeah, so let's dive into the building process, because we've already mentioned, you're jumping onto your second men's Division One, but tell us your history of programs and what you've built and what you've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So after my freshman year, I went back home to UNLV, and I started coaching high school at my alma mater, which is Arborview High School. After a few years there as a JV coach and varsity assistant, I took a head coaching job. I think I was 20 or 21 at the time, at Legacy High School. And that's kind of the jump start of my career. My second year there, I won a state championship and also created a club program that was called Vegas Extreme. After doing that for about 5 years, I got an opportunity to go be an assistant at Chandler Gilbert Community College. And then that also led to the opportunity on the men's side at Benedictine Mesa. So I was an assistant at Chandler Gilbert, volunteer at Benedictine. After that first year, the head coach, Steve Crook, he decided to take another opportunity and asked me to take over the program. And that's where my head college coaching career started. So I think I was about 25 at the time. And so after about 4 or 5 years at Benedictine and obviously having some great success, I got this opportunity to come out and start the program at Central State, which was a cause that was close to my heart. It's a historically black college. And I think it's just really needed for growing diversity in the men's game. So after about a year and a half here, I'm moving on to Merrimack to do it all over again. So yeah, I've kind of been involved in a bunch of levels. I've coached club, I've coached boys, girls, high school. I was at Mesa High School during my time in Arizona as well. So I just love being in the gym.
Yeah, for sure. So my go-to for starting a new program is Deetra Collins. I'm sure you're at least aware of her. I don't know if you know her or not, but
Yeah.
she started the program in your hometown.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, no, she's actually a good friend of mine. So I got to see her at the ABCA convention, and I always try to pick her brain when I can.
Every time I've heard of somebody starting a program, I point them toward her, because she started that UNLV program from nothing. And I guess that leads into my next question. When you're starting a college program, like you've done a couple of times, how do you build the breadth of players? Because you don't want to have 20 freshmen or even 10 freshmen. You have to somehow get players from sort of all levels so that you're filtered, so you don't want to lose them, but you have to lose some in order to bring new kids in. So how do you even balance that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple things that I've done is I lean on the international players. So if I can get, 4 or 5 international guys that have high level competitive experience, I think that really helps your gym. So right now at Central State, I have, I think, a total of 6 international students, but they're all freshmen in terms of NCAA eligibility wise. So kind of you get both. You get to build the culture you want, but you also get some competitive experience. And then the transfer portal has obviously changed college athletics. So there's a ton of kids that are looking for new places to go. And you almost want to be a little bit careful as a coach with that. You want to bring in guys with that competitive experience, but you also have to make sure they're the right kids for your culture, because, sustainability is about building a consistent culture. And so I'm very picky in terms of what kind of players I bring in from the transfer portal. And then we'll kind of fill the rest of the roster with freshmen that we can build with for the next few years.
Yeah, a lot of people talk badly about the transfer portal. It's I sort of feel the opposite. I feel like if you are going to be a culture expert, then we can take a chance on a player that maybe doesn't have that, that perfect fit, right? And we're going to mold them into something that works in our culture. How do you feel about that?
I would agree. I think if you have an established culture. So I think, if you're already a successful established culture, then one player is never going to be able to come in and completely change your culture. I guess I look at it a little differently right now because I'm building a culture, right? So I have to be just a little more cautious, and, everyone's going to be new to me and new to the program. So I just want to make sure the personalities are going to be able to come in, and I'm going to be able to mold them to the culture I want. So yeah, I used to say that back in Arizona. It's like, you can have a few, I call them my challenge kids, right? Like they might, be rough around the edges, have a little chip on their shoulder. There might be some tough moments we're going to go through in developing who we want them to become. But, I would always take on a couple of those guys because I knew that they would be worth it in the long run. So right now I'm just being, I'd say a little cautious to make sure that I get the culture established before taking too many risks.
What would you say your culture, if you were describing your culture, what is it you would like your team to be like, or your program to be like?
Yeah, that's a great question. We talk a lot about, well, first off, I got this from Alan Knipe, so I want to give him credit, but he just talked about culture at the ABCA convention, and I had the pleasure of, he used to go to Vegas every year and do a high school camp. So I've gotten to listen to him a lot, talk about culture. And the first thing is we actually define that. So I sit the guys down and I say, okay, what the heck does culture mean, right? What does it look like? And so this team this year, we talked a lot about accountability and accountability peer-to-peer. I think that's super important. I say as coaches, we're supposed to get on you. We're supposed to hold you accountable. We're supposed to remind you to do things. But when you get to the point where your teammates can hold you accountable and you cannot be reactive or get defensive in those situations, I think that's part of successful culture. Honesty is huge. I tell the guys, you're going to mess up, and off the volleyball court as well, but I always want you to feel like you can come and be super honest with me. We talk a lot about objectivity. Like, we're going to try to look at this game a little more detached from emotion than most people might. And that's going to allow us to have tough conversations. That's going to allow us to, when you're not playing, when you're underperforming, when we need more production, it's just going to allow us to have a very productive conversation and relationship as a coach and an athlete, because we're taking a lot of that emotion. And then the fourth thing I would say is competitive. We compete all the time in everything we do. So I really want the guys to healthy competition, of course, but be competitive in everything they do.
The grin on your face when you said competition and being competitive tells me everything I need to know.
Yes. That's one thing is, in my gym, we get after it. The guys, we have fun every day in practice. They're always super competitive. They get on me about the score if I mess up or give the wrong person a point or I make a bad call. And so I almost use that now to my advantage to sometimes get them frazzled and make them respond when they're emotional. Calls don't always go your way. So yeah, the guys are super competitive, but it took a while. The first few weeks, the first few months, they were a little timid. And then once we got them out of their comfort zone, it was fun to watch them compete.
Yeah, I tell my guys, first of all, I make lots of bad calls, but second, you're going to have refs that have a bad day, or you're going to have a lines person that makes a bad call. And we can't, I have one or two players who like to referee. We're working on that. So hopefully that'll get fixed. But, it's one of those, we had a team the other night who just, I love the fact that they're calling out things, but they were just doing it to be obnoxious and to get in our heads. And I'm just sitting here on the bench going, yeah, guys, you can do that all night. My guys are not listening to you. They are not getting frazzled by you. They're used to that stuff. So I hear you.
No, that's awesome. Like you said, if they see it in practice, then they get into a game. And I heard this from Russ Rose actually. He said, practice should be tougher than the game. If you're doing your job right, their practices should challenge them and put them in a lot of adverse situations. So that reminds me of my team was playing for our first high school state championship, and we knew it was going to be loud, right? But how do you replicate that in a practice environment? So I played white noise for about 30 minutes of practice in the gym. And when I tell you it was a little excruciating, I was like, oh my gosh, this is driving me crazy. But the players had to work and communicate through it, right? And so when we got in the gym and it was a packed gym, like 3,000 students, you couldn't hear yourself think, they had already prepared for it. So, I mean, it sounds like you're doing things the right way over there.
Some days you could talk to my players about that, or my parents about that. Actually, I have a good group of parents, but we've all been there. I think when they said I got texted last year, why is number 45 not playing? Like, really, during a match? Come on, man. So yeah, it was a new parent. They didn't know any better. I just said, hey, have them come talk to me. Actually, I was actually not that nice. When she said, is there a reason? I just went back and said yes. Which is really passive aggressive. I shouldn't have done that. But she then said, what's the reason? And I said, just have your son talk to me, which it sorted itself out.
Of course. This was my favorite ever parent complaint. I was coaching club. And it must have been a new family to club, but the parent timed, I guess, the amount of time on the court the goal was. She was a middle, right? So 3 rotation middle. So she timed it. So at the end of the tournament, she was like, my daughter played this many minutes and the other middle played this many minutes. I said, well, that means we're siding out way better when your daughter's on the court. I'm really glad she's so effective.
Nice.
Right? So
yeah,
it's really interesting. And she came to meet and had no idea that middles were only 3 rotation players. And yeah, it was a fun conversation.
Yeah, it's the run. I had the run the 6-2. Why does my daughter never serve conversation? Like, they're an opposite. That's kind of how it works.
How funny. Yeah, it's a fun one. They serve in practice. I always tell them that.
Yeah.
This wasn't on our topic list, but it occurs to me, again, going back to your time at Lakeland, your starting programs, Schreiber started the men's program. Actually, the women's program had been there, but when he started it, and I don't know if you're aware of this or not, he was paid about like a high school coach. So he built that program into a program that could have a full women's coach, and now it has obviously a women's and a men's coach. You're doing the same sort of thing. What are the differences from your time coaching both the men and the women? What are you changing in practice? Like what's different about it? How's the vibe different?
Yeah, that's a great question. My girls are very detail oriented, right? So I do appreciate that a lot about them, is that they're going to come in and they're going to want a very regimented practice. They're going to ask a lot of questions. They're going to really want to feel like they got reps on very specific things, and getting my guys to focus for 10 minutes at a time is a struggle. So yeah, I would say it's just kind of their approach to the game. And I think that starts even at the youth level with guys. We talk a lot about how they do a lot of things that might even simulate playing a sport, throwing rocks, throwing the football, running around, doing all. So they'll get in the gym before I even walk in to start practice, and they're already playing and hitting balls and serving and passing. And the girls tend to be very regimented. So if I walk in at this time, I know they're going to be doing this passing portion drill. So I use a little bit of my philosophy for the other to help the other side. So with the women's side, I like to take that, regiment and technicality and technical aspect, I should say, and implement it on the guy's side. And then on the vice versa, I make the women play a lot more and have to learn through competition and 6-on-6. And we always talk about the game teaching the game. And so I think that's important for them to utilize as they progress.
I see why you're winning. That's something that I've told people forever. If if you're a girls coach or women's coach, go coach the men for a while. If you're a men's coach or a boys coach, go coach the girls for a while. Figure out the differences, and then figure out how to cross pollinate. I don't know if that's the right word, but you figure out how to take what's in the one gym into the other, and that's it's normally a big area of improvement, right?
Oh, I agree a ton. I think the games are so different, right? They're the same game, but they're so different in just the way they're approached. And like you said, I think you can get a lot from learning from the other side. One of the things that'll drive me crazy sometimes as a collegiate coach when I recruit boys players is that if you get boys coaches that never have coached girls, it's just sometimes the Wild West. You'll see crazy stuff in warm-up lines, you'll see crazy stuff in practice, and for me, I might only get to see that player for 5 minutes in warm up. So, if they're kind of going through the motions, I'll say, and hitting lines but on the women's side, it's okay to, be loose and let them play. And they're going to learn a lot, like you said, through just going out and competing in the game. So, yeah, I agree. I think if you coach both, you'll find out kind of the perfect mix of what each side needs.
Yeah, my boys are hilarious. I mean, it's like we're still learning. We play against ALA Queen Creek, which is a great school, great program. Lots of club players. I've got one kid who's played club for a couple years, and he's a good player, a good solid player, but he's not at his peak yet. And they're out trying to run shoots in practice. Some guys, we will never execute a shoot. And, how about a go ball? If you really want to go a little, give us something that we can probably get done. That's on the one side. On the other side, playing really good programs. Now I've got 2 freshmen in middles, and they're just learning. So when they run a 31 against them, they're like, what was that? It's like, guys, at this point, they're starting to figure that stuff out, which is fun. But the guys will go for anything. And then the girls will want something they can execute successfully and not make errors and stuff. And, mixing that up helps a lot. My one question, though, for you is, do you run the slide on the boys' side? Because everybody...
I have. So
okay,
that's
cool.
A great question. That was a topic of conversation this year with my middles. They wanted to run the slide, and I said, guys, you're never on time for a 1. So I don't know if we're there yet, but I would say at Benedictine Mesa, I had a very talented middle. He was about 6'9", and so we would let him come off 1 foot. We would run, I'd call it like a step, but a back one basically, where he'd come off 1 foot. So like a, inside slide, and then we'd also run into the pin, and he was really effective at it.
Nice.
Going back to Schreiber again, we went to HP. I don't know if you ever went out to those clinics, but they were incredible. And he went one year and asked a question about can boys teams run a slide, and Hugh happened to be given the presentation. He said, I don't know. We have a D hitter, we have the back row going, and then he looked at Chad and said something like, "Wait, are you that guy in the Midwest that's running slide with your men's team?" And Chad's like, yeah, obviously. Like, all right, we got to talk. And then they went and had lunch together and discussed how slide works and doesn't work for men's and boys. Where do you think it works?
Well, I think the reality of, the D ball, right? So getting right sides that are truly efficient at attacking the back row, especially at the youth levels, is hard. It takes a lot of time to be effective and be able to have your system run that efficiently. And I think the slide, if you get some kids that have played basketball, it's natural for them. It's really easy to teach. So the way I look at it is that if you have that kind of athlete in your gym, you're kind of better off spending time on teaching that slide and having an attack behind the setter when he's front row, than maybe trying to get a a kid that's less experienced and maybe not your most efficient hitter hitting the D ball. Ideally, we have, a big physical right side and we're running the D ball a lot. But I know in my systems, we've had middles that were just so dominating when we could run them behind the setter. It was way more effective than what we would get production from the back row right side attack. So that's kind of a situation. But I always say it's based off your athletes. I say build your system to fit your personnel, not the other way around.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. Where I think we're seeing it, I think the D3s, the men's D3s, there are a couple of them that are using it pretty effectively, and certainly the top club teams, can run it. By the time you get, and you know this better than I would, but like the D1s, they just aren't doing it. They're using.
Well, so Purdue Fort Wayne this year actually has a phenomenal athletic middle. I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but he runs it. And man, I mean, when they played Loyola in the semifinals, they just did
Yeah,
not have an answer for it. I mean, he was so effective coming off one foot. So I agree. As a whole, the Division One level on the men's side isn't like bought into this philosophy, but you're starting to see more and more programs flirt with it. I know Hawaii had a middle that would run it a few years back that was really efficient as well.
yeah, yeah. That's what I recall too. It's. I think your point was the best. You take the people you have, figure out what they can do, and then give them that flexibility to use the things that they're good at, right?
Absolutely. I think that's big. And excuse me, I think as a coach, it makes your job a little tougher because especially in college when you have guys graduating or maybe transferring, whatever it might be, you're always evaluating and reevaluating your system. But I think you have to. I've never had two teams that play the same way. Even with the same guys coming back, they make progress over the off season or they get better at some different areas. And so we might be a primarily, float serving team one year and then have 5 out of 6 guys top spinning the next. So I'm always about what's best for our system this year and what can my personnel do.
Yeah, I find it evolves, especially the high school level. I actually had a middle last year who I whispered in his ear, "Would you be interested in setting?" Because he's a really good athlete. He's about 5'11", he's got about a 35-inch vertical, and I'm like, I want to use him to attack, but he's got that, he wants to work at the game. So you need that in a setter. So I worked him all off season, comes into the season, and I've got another setter who's decent. Actually, he's quite good, but can't be in the gym all year. And, about halfway through the season, I said, you know what, we need more attack. So we're running a 5-1 now with this kid swinging the 9 or the D in the 90 ball. And it's like, I said, guys, the back row attack on the right side can be really effective with this guy. We got to use him. And it's helped. It's given us a little more diverse offense and helped us play a better, second round against our teams this year. So, the teams we played the first round are like, whoa, what happened to you guys? I'm like, well, we got better. So.
Absolutely. Well, one thing we did is we started flirting with, when our setter is front row and they swing block to the pin, they're blocking the outside hitter, having our middle actually transition straight back towards the right pin so that they can come in and hit the red. I call it the red, but hit front row right side. They can come in and hit a back one. They can hit what we call a push. So we've started to do that even at Central State as the year went on. We're like, okay, we're kind of stagnant in this rotation or we're struggling to side up in transition when our setter's front row. So we got pretty creative and it was really fun because like you said, the second time we played teams, they did not have that in their scouting report. And then in the conference championship, my middle had 4 or 5 kills on the pin when the first time or the second time we played Edward Waters, they hadn't seen him hit the pin at all. So it's fun to always grow and diversify even throughout the season.
We've got to take an opportunity, and you brought this up before, to discuss the Southern Intercollegiate and what's going on there. And it comes in a couple of layers. First, there's the conference itself, the set of schools, which I think most people just don't understand the role of HBCs. And and where that all came from. But then building on that as well, where First Serve came in and picked Southern to expand the men's game. Do you want to just give us some of your thoughts on, I guess, start with the conference and what HBCs are all about, and then we can go into First Serve after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the SIAC, the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, it's a Division II conference, and it's interesting in terms of geographically because we have schools all over. So we're in Ohio. The closest school to us is in Kentucky, and then we have conference members in Georgia, Florida. Um, Gosh, let me think where else. Alabama. We're kind of spread out and throughout this whole region. Um, so historically black colleges, obviously were created a long time ago to when we did not have interracial schools. So it was an opportunity for black students to go to college and get an education. And now as times progressed, they're still just a big part of our culture, I would say, the part of the African American culture and experience. So adding men's volleyball was kind of a huge step, in my opinion, just in terms of getting more diverse athletes playing this sport and also exposure. Being in the gym this past week, it was incredible because I've never been a part of an experience where I wasn't one of few black people in the whole facility. Oftentimes, just the reality of, I think, diversity in our sport. So to be in this gym, just to watch a lot of minority athletes competing at such a high level, it's incredible. I mean, I think we just want to grow opportunities and exposure and experience. And I said my favorite moment of that too was watching. There was this young black kid and his dad that were watching. They were there for basketball, I think, and they sat down and watched our whole match. And that little kid was just so engaged. And so it's exciting to say, hey, now there's a lot of guys that look like you playing at a high level because there are some, but this is, I think, a huge undertaking for our sport of men's volleyball.
Yeah, and that's one of the statements you made. A bunch of people all in the gym where you're not the only black person there, and so many of us have never had that type of experience that you're talking about, where you got to walk into a place and, man, I look a little different than every other person. So I don't know. I think I think you hit on the one big thing is, let's see some people that are similar to me and showing me that if I'm that little kid, showing me that I can do this. This is something that I can do too.
Yeah, and I think that's why football and basketball have been, such dominant sports is that you can watch them on TV. They're on pretty much every weekend, majority of the year between college and NFL, or the NBA. So it's one of those where the more we get exposure and see more kids playing the sport. And I think for me as a coach, it's awesome too, because, it can be discouraging, especially when I first started. Not a lot of coaches look like me, especially at a high level. And so it was almost daunting. And then now that the SIAC, I think we've increased the amount of minority coaches in men's volleyball by probably 25%. Maybe even higher than that. Yeah. So it's been incredible growth.
What's the if you knew, or I guess, what's your opinion on what are the things that we're not getting right, that the general public doesn't get right about HBCs? Because there are a lot of assumptions. You've been at one now for a year, and you didn't grow up in that, in that environment, so you were learning as well. But what are we getting wrong, and what are the benefits of the HBCs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did not. I was a West Coaster. My aunt went to Clark, Atlanta. So that's about my extent of knowing HBCUs before this experience. So I was a little intimidated at first just because if you don't know or understand, or you haven't been to one or been a part of the environment, it can be intimidating. And I think that's anything that you haven't been exposed to is going to sound a little intimidating at first. I think what we're getting wrong is that, first off, they are more diverse than I think a lot of people would anticipate, both in our staff and our student population. They're great opportunities to get education. Like we have STEM programs and a lot of scholarship money available through some grant programs from the government. So it's a really good opportunity for a lot of students to compete at a high level. And then the third thing is resources. I think sometimes they think that historically black colleges are way under resourced. But I don't think that's the case on a lot of campuses. It would depend school by school and institution by institution. But I know for Central State, there's just a lot of good things happening, and they're really spending time on investing in their athletic department and growing. So it's going to be exciting to see what the new coach does with this program. But yeah, it's a great opportunity. My team was really diverse. We had a lot of internationals. I had a couple guys. Actually, one was from Arizona, one was from Las Vegas, that were white guys that at first were like, Coach, can I go to HBCU? What does that look like? And they came and they just loved it. They had a great experience.
Yeah, they're showing the picture right now of your championship team. If this was 2 years in the future, you'd be getting ready to go to the NCAA tournament, right? In 2024.
And I'll be honest, starting a program and coaching guys and girls, as much as I would love to be in the NCAA tournament in a week or so, break is not the worst thing for me right now.
Yeah, I'm sure that. And that's Chad was telling me that too, coaching both of those teams. He said, whatever we can do to get a break was good. But yeah, I couldn't help thinking about that when I saw, I was on Facebook and seeing you guys marching toward that championship. I thought, wow, the conference in 2 years is going to get that auto bid, and you'd have been there. That's a really neat it's a neat accomplishment, especially in that first year of that program.
Yeah, and I think anyone that started a program or even just kind of turned the program around, you guys know that you invest so much of your life into making it successful. So it's been a year and a half in the making. So this championship, I was fortunate enough to win a national championship with my previous program, but this one was up there. I mean, the emotion I felt in winning that conference tournament was, I would say, on par, just because, like I said, there's so much that went into this and such a huge undertaking, including moving across the country, knowing no one, to just grow the game and really invest in men's volleyball. So it was awesome.
I remember you talking about that first national championship, and some people dug into this research, but you're the first Black head coach to have won a national title, correct?
That's from my understanding, and that's incredible. I mean, I get chills when you say that out loud because my background was unique, and the reason why this is so close to my heart is that I was raised by a single mother, and I grew up in a lower socioeconomic household. So we struggled a lot of my life, and I couldn't really afford a lot of these opportunities. So that's what has motivated me, is just giving back to people and creating opportunities where there might not be any, and just changing people's trajectory. Because I had a coach that basically exposed me to volleyball and has changed my whole life trajectory. And I'm sitting here because of their impact, and that's just my goal. And that's right there. Yes, I've coached a little bit everywhere: girls club, junior college. That's my high school boys team up there. My club from Las Vegas I used to run. Fun story about this picture in the top right corner. That was my first boys team in Arizona, East Valley Juniors. My first year, I think we had 11 kids, and we competed 16, but half of my kids were 14 and below. And then fast forward 4 years later, before we kind of COVID, we decided to move a different direction as a club, but we had 13 teams. We went from 1 to 13, and there's 3 players on this picture. One's going to be a freshman at BYU this next year. The other 2 went to Southern Virginia and got an opportunity to compete in the national semifinals last year. And so it just makes me so proud to see, how far those kids came. And then, the top left is my Benedictine squad.
Yeah, you're breaking ground in so many different ways. It's just incredible. Building teams and winning championships, coaching both the boys and the girls. I mean, it's just it's incredible. You should be. For the next 6 or 7 years, you could be given AVCA presentations. like on center stage, and some of them will be 6 years ago I did this, you know.
Yeah, they tend to ask me a little bit more recently, so we'll see if they can negotiate with me again. I'm just kidding. No,
Yeah.
it's an honor, and honestly, like I think anyone that knows me, I'm a very humble person. That's a big part of me, and I always remember where I came from, and that this opportunity. I've worked hard for it, but at the same time, I've been blessed and fortunate to have the opportunity because my first AD took a big risk. You're hiring a 25-year-old guy that has only really been in the college ranks for 1 year, and so a lot of those people have given me opportunities to be here today, and like I said, my hope is just that there's young coaches, any coaches out there that are watching this and going, you know, I can do it. Even if the pathway hasn't been paved yet, there is a pathway. You might just have to do a lot of digging and paving yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. We've talked about that a couple times in VCT, just how to get a more diverse coaching group into volleyball. And somebody brought it up. I don't know. It was maybe a week or two ago, where the ABCA was going to start a program to get 4 people mentored, and I'm like, man, 4 is not enough. Like, how do we? To me, I feel like, and I even comment, I'm like, let's just open our Rolodexes and get people meeting each other so that we can get a more representative set of coaches across, whether it's male, female, black, brown, whatever. Uh, to just to, I wish I knew how to do it. I don't. But
It starts even before that. I mean, I'm trying to get minority players to play. I mean, my school is half Hispanic. We've made some inroads there. The guys are starting to go, oh, this is kind of fun, and they come in the gym, and I mean, it's a different game. I see a 6'3", African American kid walking around. I go, hey, Cal, you ought to come out and try this out. And they just look at me like, oh, I don't want to play that sport. That's not, And I'm like, okay. I've had one basketball player in 4 years, and it'd be perfect, especially for the guys who get cut. It's taken some time. But by the same token, I have a coach, actually one of our guys who does security and coaches for the football team, stopped in. He had played for us back, and we had this really good run in the aughts. I think he played for us in 06, 07. He stopped in the gym. I said, my assistant's leaving next year. He's going back to Colorado. Would you be interested? And he's like, yeah, I would. And then I found out he was coaching receivers and defensive backs on the football team. I'm like, I need this guy. I need him to bring those guys into my gym. This year the football coach was a little less. He was supportive, but really wanted his guys to do track primarily, and so I didn't get those guys. So finding ways to make it a fun sport and get the reputation and draw on the community is something that's new to me after coming here 4 years ago from the North Shore of Chicago, where that was not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it is a challenge. And I think when I was in Vegas, when I got to my program, I had the same issues, is that there were just not very many minority players. There were not a lot of multi-sport athletes. It was, and by the time I left, we really started to shift that. And I think part of it was just the exposure. They saw me in the gym. They're like, oh, this guy, looks like me and is playing. And so that's one of the solutions I mentioned, is that whether it's just coming to different high schools or club programs and doing clinics, I really think we need some type of initiative where we can get minority players and coaches to come into, specific schools and areas and programs to just show, us playing the game at a high level. Because I think that sometimes, like I said, the daunting part is that if you don't see anyone else that looks like you, you're so much less likely to try it. Once kids try volleyball, and I think we all know this, it's rare that I've met a boy that I have him hit a ball and he, gets a good swing on it, and then he's like, "Oh, that was fun." It's rare. So you just got to get them in the gym, and I think that's the biggest thing we have to tackle is how do you get them into the gym? Because once they're there, I think coaches can do the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And the one of the struggles I've learned a ton from Jen Fry on this. One of the struggles is as a society as a whole, we need to take this on. We can't put the burden on you, Ray, to make this happen. The Our entire society needs to make a change, and how we do that, in some ways, I guess the ABCA just starting with these 4 coaches, maybe that's a small way, but it just doesn't feel like enough to me. I want to do more.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, I mean, I think they're hoping the trickle effect, and there will be a trickle effect, and you have to start somewhere. But at the same time, I agree. It's how can we do it on a larger scale, and figure out how to have the. I mean, the dialogue is the first piece because I will say in the past 2 years or so, this is the most dialogue I've ever had about being a minority in the sport of men's volleyball, or volleyball in general. And so I think that's awesome that we're starting to have the conversations because for the longest time it was just kind of something that you knew but didn't really talk about. And so it's been awesome. I think HBCUs has opened a door in men's volleyball to say, hey, there is a need for this. And it feels good to know that like the ABCA and other organizations are recognizing the need for this. But I know I've been trying to scheme as much as I can to like, what is a master plan to really grow diversity in this game? And I think we're going to find a solution somehow, some way in the near future.
It's just hooking people, I mean, it's hey, you love this game, can you teach this game? Can you get in the gym? And maybe I sometimes want to default to camps. Like there's so many coaches needed for camps and for clubs. Maybe that's a place to start. Just to get a much bigger mass of people, whoever it is, into our game.
You get some economics in it too. I think I have a woman who I trained as a player, and then she became a coach at our club, and we knew each other for a while, and then of course we all went in different directions, and she spent probably 8 years or so working the college ranks, and just finally said, I got to go make a living. I can't do it as well doing this. And my guess is she'll go coach part-time and do the club thing or something like that, or maybe a high school job like I do. But for getting anybody into the sport, finding ways to be able to balance that. I'd say is I was able to do it because my career was, gave me the time to go and coach, and gave me the resources to be able to do that. But that's not a lot of people's situation. And, maybe we can draw enough, get enough, TV coverage or other revenues that we can start to, pay coaches at the lower levels so they can stay in it and develop. Like my assistant coach now, he's going to do fine because he knows everybody in Colorado Springs. So he's going back to a target-rich environment, but it's not that way for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge point. My first job when I was hired as a head coach, it was part-time at Benedictine, and my stipend was $8,000. And so we're having that conversation at the men's high level. Like Division I programs are losing their top assistants year over year to the women's side because there's more money and resources available. And then, that's at the Division I men's level. They're struggling to keep coaches on the men's side. But if you trickle down and start to look at, volleyball's tough because, you have to be able to commit a lot of time, right? And it's weekends and it's traveling and it's, night practices, and someone with a 9-to-5 job, it's a tough commitment, especially if you have a family or other commitments. So I agree, to make opportunities just make sense from an economical standpoint is important so that people can actually commit to doing this. And that's going to really grow, opportunities and grow the game.
Yeah, that's, I think, the biggest thing is it's growing the game. I mean, I've been on a state board or region board for years, and we've always talked about how do we grow the game in places where the money isn't there, or we don't have coaches that look like this or that. Um, you know, and nobody on that board ever had any good ideas about how to do it, including me. So it just it's frustrating that we we have waited so long. I think that's why I'm so impressed with what First Serve did. They could have done this in any conference, but it makes so much sense what they did in the SAIC, because it's a it's a population of people that was far underserved.
No, absolutely. And I think they're onto something. I know Sperron UCLA went to Atlanta and did a clinic, but I thought maybe that's the first step. Maybe it's now going on the road and, like you said, camps. Can we get in there and run a camp, and we can grab some top tier players and coaches, and everyone at each location can help facilitate, because, as you said, it's a big undertaking, and it's not something that I think can be done by one person, two people, even a small group of people. It's going to take the whole community's investment. But that's one thing I've been thinking about a little bit, is maybe we need to take this on the road. As I leave the SIAC, maybe this is an opportunity to have a bigger impact in the sport and say, how can we get out to different regions? How can we get out to economically disadvantaged communities and underserved communities? Because we know volleyball is expensive. The reality of club volleyball is that, if you want to play and train to get collegiate opportunities, it costs a lot, but we can get those donations. There's no reason we can't get free volleyballs. We can't get free, even net systems and poles, and get into these schools or communities and provide at least the resources to get started. That's kind of what I'd like to see, and then get exposure.
In some respects, we're the perfect sport for that, because we're gonna have a lot of failure, and if we could get the tolerance of failure in playing and trying to figure out programs and how to get to people that we have on the court, we'd be a lot better off. People are like, oh, that didn't work. I'm like, well, of course it didn't work. How many things don't work in a volleyball match? Pretty much everything. So we're used to failure, but we don't tolerate it as much in what we're trying to build as we do on the court, which is a little weird. But I'm sure some of the stuff's going to work, and I've been banging my head against the wall the last 4 years, and some of the stuff's worked, and then pandemics and stuff come up, and you have to adapt. I mean, when I was coaching club, you would never think of a kid missing 40% of practices and being one of your starters, or oh, wait a minute, he missed practice the day before a match, he can't play. I'm like, no, we can't do that. We won't have a team on the floor. It's other than academics, we've got to adapt to a lot of other things. Academics is, a go no go kind of thing. But beyond that, it's like, hey, I had to work yesterday. A lot of my guys have jobs, and they're like, hey, Chipotle needs me tomorrow. I can't be at the match. And you go, okay, well, that plan went to hell. What's my next plan? So I think maybe on the development side, we've got to have that same thick skin and just say, hey, we'll go with what works. And if it doesn't work, we'll go on to the next thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you hit on the head too with that adaptability, because especially if you're coaching in an underserved community or economically disadvantaged community, the reality is for a lot of these kids, they might be worried about what they're going to eat and not being to practice on time. And so it takes the right kind of coach in person to get in there and really be like a steward of the game, and be willing to kind of, I would say, fluctuate some of your philosophies, because I know as coaches, we're disciplinarians, right? We like things structured and done a certain way, but you have to also realize the clientele you're serving. And I've been in some of those inner city programs where, I know this kid has way bigger struggles than just volleyball practice, and this is an outlet. So, where I might have kicked a kid off for missing practice, or there might have been some discipline, I tended to be a lot more flexible, as long as there was obviously communication and it was fun to see those guys kind of be raised through the game of volleyball.
Yeah, if you're the best
So
part
what
of their
changes
day.
now, go ahead, Steve.
No, it's one of those things. I can't. When I have a day where the disciplinarian from the old school kicks in, I go, "Are you the best part of their day today? If you're not doing your job."
What changes now at Merrimack? Like, what do you what direction do you take that? How does that all begin, and where do you go?
Yeah, great question. So, Merrimack, I'm walking in as the underdog, so it's a little bit different than Central State, where we're all first year programs. There's some very established programs, and you talk about Sacred Heart and St. Francis. You have some still fairly new, St. Francis Brooklyn, I think is about 4 or 5 years old now. And then, Long Island and FDU got a year jump start. So it's coming in. I want to hit the ground running. I want to be competitive out of the gates. So really trying to recruit the right kids. And then what I'm loving about Merrimack already is just I have one program, and obviously it's still going to be a sufficient amount of time, but I think I'll be able to actually commit time outside of the gym to a bigger mission in this game. And that's kind of where I'm at in my career is like, what is the bigger picture in volleyball and especially in underserved communities. So we're excited. I think it's going to be a great opportunity to build and compete at a high level. But I also think it's going to give me some freedom to really try to impact this game beyond just coaching, day to day in practice.
Well, we need that impact from you for sure. So I think that's it's a great move for you to just have the one program. We'll get more Ray Lewis in the volleyball world, which is a good thing for us. Steve, we're up against the hour pretty much. So do you have any last thoughts, or where do you want to go?
It's just every time we get together, I'm impressed with kind of your your knowledge of all this history of the game, which I kind of didn't get for a bunch of reasons. One, you connect people very well, and that's not my forte. But I getting to know Ray and having met him a little while back, and having one of the players that I used to work with on the girls' side, playing for him last year it's good to catch up and to see your journey because I've got a young coach who it's going to be one of the better coaches in the country, I think, over time. He's 21 now, but I just know, kind of how he's working and knowing that he probably can outcoach me tomorrow, and that's kind of fun. But by the same token, it's great to get folks like Ray here and have some get some perspective. But I love what you're trying to do, and it'll be very interesting to see where it takes you over the next few years as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, it's a journey, and I never thought I'd live in Boston. I never thought I'd live in Ohio, and so I'm excited to see where this journey takes me. And I'm hopeful that we'll get to continue to work together and make some progress and growth. And I think that's what it's about, is just people like us that are invested in this game and love it and want to give back to it. So.
Well, hopefully we can get you on in the future ones. We did our first panel last week. It'd be fun to get a panel of coaches going, especially some of the younger coaches to talk about, what the challenges are and how to overcome them and how to get people into the game. So we keep working on this stuff, Ray. We get, this is not big viewership, although I will be converting it into a podcast, and people seem to like to listen to these more than watch them because the time of day and all that stuff. But hopefully we'll be doing more of this and learning more. And I'll probably reach out to you with a couple of questions about what can I do with these guys coming forward. But BJ, what about you before we go? And his mic is dead. There he is.
There we go. Yeah, thanks, Ray, for coming on. It was awesome. Glad that we could reconnect and hear what's going on with you, what you're doing, and thanks for all the insight. It was awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I had a great time.
Okay, have a great season, and we'll be watching.
Sounds good. Thank you.